Sorry, you can edit that, right? Okay, good. um,
All right, and we're recording. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Do What You Can for the People, the show that nobody asked for. I'm really excited today to have my friend Fatima. Fatima is an old friend of mine, not in age, but just in terms of length of friendship. We go way back to Miami days. She's a nonprofit manager by day, but by night, she's a music enthusiast and a badass femme DJ. She's currently a resident for 3 collectives, the Nomadic Rabbit Hole in NYC, Deep Tech and Groove Syndicate in, Rabbit Hole in NYC, Deep Tech and Groove Syndicate in DC. And in case all of that isn't enough, Fatima, myself, and a group of our lady friends co-founded Boobs and Beats. Fatima's been next leveling it with workshops and open deck sessions and networking for women in the industry. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later if you're interested in getting involved. So I wanted to bring Fatima on today to kind of talk about, we're both really passionate about women's equality, and something that we talk about a lot are women in entertainment. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen because we put together some fun facts. All right, so not a whole lot of it. This is shocking. Most of us know that women make up 70% of the global health workforce, but in general, they only represent about 25% of senior decision-making roles. Women are paid less than men on average 10 to 30%. They only hold 22% of parliamentary or legislative positions worldwide. And in the US, women only hold 23% of Congress seats, which equates to about 127 women to 408 men, which is a little bit absurd if you ask me. Bringing it to a business perspective, because that's my background, I pulled some stats from some of the readings I've done, and in 2018, women only held 38% of managerial positions and 22% of C-suite positions. They were only 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs were women, and today there is only one woman of color who is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and it's based in China. In 2018, women held only 19% of S&P 1500 board seats. And this was just a fun fact from a 2016 article that I read, that there are more CEOs of large US companies named David than there are CEOs that are women entirely. And David's not even the most popular name. It's John, which was at like 6 or 7%. Insane. So to bring it back to the entertainment space for a second, which is what we're really here to talk about, because we could talk about women's inequality for like hours and hours and hours probably, but we wanted to really hone in on entertainment. And Fatima helped pull some of these statistics. So Forbes has a list of the top 15 highest paid DJs, and currently there are no women on that list. She checked this morning, and Beatport releases a top 10 tracks list every day, and this morning there were no tracks by female producers. Today, only 17% of registered songwriters are female, and in 2018, only 19% of festival artists were female. Resident Advisor, which is kind of one of the big names in the space, used to do a poll of their followers, I guess, and they stopped doing that poll in 2016 because it was just promoting more of that male-centric attitude. And they released this statement that I thought was really poignant. And it talks about how dance music is an art form born in queer communities, and it's shaped by people of all colors, and it's populated by artists of all genders. And they really didn't feel like this list was progressive, and it was misrepresenting the reality of the scene, and maybe even helping to reinforce some of its harmful power dynamics. So that's just kind of setting the stage for what Fatima and I would like to talk about today.
yeah, and if you want, I can elaborate a little bit more on that. I think we're all kind of familiar with Resident Advisor, right? They basically have all the events, electronic music events around the world. You know, every country is pretty much represented. They write articles and things. And this poll was basically the people that attended these events that bought the tickets through the platform could vote of which, which DJ they thought was like DJ of the year. And there's a bunch of these polls already. There's a DJ Mag one, which um, it's not very legitimate. There's critiques of that one, but that one, for example, for 2019, there's only three women out of 100 DJs. There's three women, and it's like 21 slots for you to even get to the first woman, which is Nina Kravis, who's one of the most popular women out there today. Um, and so many of these polls exist, and I think it was really interesting of Resident Advisor to it ran these polls a couple years, and they realized, it's very homogenous, it's very slanted towards men. This isn't fair. People see this, and then they start to internalize that maybe, women aren't talented. Maybe we're not ranked because we're good. Maybe we can't stand next to men, as DJs. And so, yeah, you read out the statement. I think it's a really beautiful elucidation of what is happening in the scene.
And it's sad that this is happening everywhere, but it makes sense that it would trickle into the arts and music scene. And I think that what we'd like to talk about today, though, is kind of specifics for women to advance themselves and also how men can be allies in this space, right?
Of course, exactly. You can kind of rub people the wrong way a little bit when you try to push something, even though it's like the just thing to do, it's the fair thing to do. Women are half the population of the world. And just like you showed us in the stats, and there's many more stats, like you said, we're just consistently denied rights and access and health and education and just like every level of life, we're not equal to men. And yeah, of course, it's going to extend to entertainment. And I just think, like you said, men are really important to be allies in this whole thing because they're the gatekeepers. It's a fact that male DJs are the ones that headline the festivals. They run the labels. They're promoted. They're ranked on these lists. They book the events. They own the clubs. You know what I mean? So you want to collaborate with them. You don't want them to feel like they're being threatened or we haven't earned our place. I was telling you, before we had this conversation, that I think that there's a lot of this talk that men should make room for women in the scene. They should step aside. And I think it's noble people that think that or say that, but I don't truly envision the movement moving that way. I think it should be a proactive and positive thing, and we should think of widening a space instead of considering it something finite. That's like we have to make trade-offs for. I don't know what you think about that, Nikki.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that there are only so many seats at the table and that in order to get a seat at the table, we have to like tip a man over and claim it. I also thought what was really interesting, though, was one of the stats that I didn't include, but you sent me, was that 50% of festival attendees identify as female, but 75% of festival attendees said that they would still attend the festival even if there weren't any female DJs. And that's kind of one of the opportunities that we as consumers of entertainment, and whether you're male or female, have an opportunity to use that buyer power and kind of say, hey, like maybe if I don't see a female DJ on a lineup, maybe I'll think twice about whether or not I want to go there. And I know that's something that you do actively. So I think that that's an opportunity that it doesn't really matter if you're a male or a female in the scene as a DJ or not. You can kind of use your power to shift the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that you said that too, because like final needle. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think we as a people, we tend to co-evolve with the biases that are kind of embedded within our environments, and we perpetuate them. So that kind of explains this whole majority of people saying, what, I don't care if there's not a guy on the lineup. And I'm going to say that I'm very guilty of it. It wasn't until these last few years when we created our collective that I actually started to look at myself and say, wow, a lot of my favorite DJs are men. I go to shows that are men and I don't notice. And I never used to really care because to me, I was so used to, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not indoctrinated, but like just used to seeing men, hearing men, men being praised and all of that. So I didn't even notice myself, and I'm a woman. And then I became a DJ. And once I started to see, I'd pay more attention to the bookings because I was getting booked or my friends were getting booked. Once I started to pay attention to these bookings, it wasn't just on the local level, it's at every level. You know what I mean? It's festivals as big as Coachella and, the local bar where, they do their monthly party, which I would argue is even more important because locally is where these artists are made, and locally is going to have an impact because these are the opportunities where women can learn, they can network, they can grow, they can gain exposure, and ultimately rise to the level of these top 100 lists and like highest paid DJs.
So this is not something that I think I've asked you before, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that women face in terms of getting to the point where they could be on these lineups? Is it lack of training? Is it lack of confidence? Is it lack of mentorship? And what are some of the things that you've heard out there?
So yeah, so I think it's definitely a lot of the things that you said. Definitely, I think confidence is important, but primarily would be access for me. And I think the things that impact access are these perceptions, right? I interviewed this DJ one time. His name is Adam Bayer. He is the label boss for Drum Code, which is a very major techno label. And I think he has two women on his label. One of them is his wife, and another one is Nicole, who's like also a very big female techno DJ. I interviewed him a couple years ago, and I asked him, I said, why are there so few female DJs in the scene? You try to promote them, but what's happening? And his argument, which is very common, is that DJing was a nerd hobby and women just weren't interested in tech. They just weren't inclined to kind of do these things. And so this justification kind of makes technophilia and technical prowess and know-how a masculine construct, right? Because that's completely untrue. I'm sure there's tons of female engineers and computer scientists that are going to argue with you. So I think there's that, and coupled with that, you kind of insidiously think, well, if they're not inclined, that means they're not talented, they're not skilled. And many times I've had men mansplain to me, and it's not an evil thing, you know what I mean? They're not trying to insult you or whatever, but I think they just genuinely think you don't know certain things. And it's really hilarious because everyone's self-taught. There are going to be gaps in your learning unless you're an audio engineer, you went to music school for years and years and years. There's going to be gaps in your learning, and obviously some people are going to know more about this aspect or less about another. So I think those are basically the major points, that they think we're not inclined, they think we're not skilled, they think we're not interested in it, we're not talented, and we're kind of playing catch up, which I don't think is true. And then that kind of extends to um, I'm going to book more men because they're more capable and they have more experience and blah, 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 on and on and on and on. So yeah, I think that, and also it's a little bit of, like we had talked about, it's the male's world, they own the labels. If you can think of all the crews, like what are some crews that you like, Desert Hearts, Dirty Bird, Robot Heart, like Afterlife, all the crews that are out there, they're majority male. They might have one or two token females, um, but they control the access, they are the gatekeepers, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's wrong that men kind of have their male crews and they have their collectives, but if it's just exclusively male collectives controlling the scene, how can you expect you know us to kind of move forward, or anyone to kind of expect there to be balance if it's just dominated by one gender?
Yeah, and something that we talked about in one of my classes recently was about changing the status quo. And I think that has a lot to do with the access and the confidence that you were talking about. So, the status quo right now is that DJing and this tech heavy industry is a male's world. And it's kind of like this self-feeding cycle where men think that, and so they don't give the opportunities to women, and then women lack the confidence to continue pursuing those opportunities. And it fucking sucks, to be quite honest. But something that we talked about in class was this get two in the pool effect, where if you have like a lineup of DJs to pick from, and you say there's like 12 of them, and you only have 6 spots, if there's only one in that lineup of 12, the statistical chances of her being selected are pretty low, because what you're saying is that you're promoting that status quo, that this is a male's world, and oh, she's probably not as competent and she's different, and that's a bad thing. But if you have two in there, there was an HBR study in 2016, and this is from a business perspective, that it saw that it jumped the likelihood increased from 0% of being selected to 50%, which is incredible. That, you know, all of a sudden there's a real shot for this woman. And I think that's really something that could be applicable to the entertainment industry as well, that if you start to see more women who do have that confidence to go out there, then you could start changing that status quo.
That's an interesting point, because then it kind of makes it more important to like come together as women, you know what I mean? And support each other in that way, because it is really hard. I mean, you know, in the business world, I'm sure in every other like aspect, you know, a woman going it alone is going to be difficult, you know, and they might feel like they have to compete and all of that. But I mean, what you're just underlining is basically saying, you know, if you have a buddy, if you have another woman, you're normalizing it, right? You know, you're making it much more likely that, you know, both of you are going to succeed. So that's interesting. But you know what, it's not something that I really see as lacking. And that's something that I will say about women, that every time I play with a woman, or I'm booked with a woman, or I play before her or after her, whatever, I talk to them and I find out they're a woman, they're always incredibly supportive. They're always incredibly positive. We, you know, congratulate each other and we say have a good set and we share stuff. And it's something that I don't see with men. I see way more competition with men. You know, men sneaking up behind each other and taking pictures of their tracks and like sneaky things, you know, where I think they just like, we're supposed to be like the competitive ones, like getting into cat fights, but it's never ever been my experience as women DJs.
And I think that's been one of the founding missions of Boobs and Beats, was to kind of bring women together to support one another, whether you're a music producer or a mixer or just someone who loves to dance, because that's who I am. I don't know what the hell I'm doing in front of a turntable. But the first workshop that we did, I think it was last summer or fall, it was super fun. It was just like a bunch of women in a space learning how to use turntables and having a good time.
And that's like, after that workshop, actually, we did an open decks after that, but it kind of dawned on me that like people don't understand the marketability of it, because there was all these women, right? And then they invited their girlfriends, and then we're all dancing and having fun. And I was like, if a club owner saw this is all you need. You would have lines out the door if people saw women just like dancing around, having a good time. Like, but you know what I mean? Like, you would have that ratio like locked. So that actually made me realize just how marketable it is. You know what I mean? I mean, we're the reason men go out at night. Come on, let's not lie, right?
That is so true. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit, because the whole reason that we first talked about doing an episode on this was we were talking a little bit about the opportunity that women have now that we're in quarantine. How all of a sudden there's less of this reliance on the people who are booking talent for festivals or talent for clubs, because everything's been shut down. And so one of the things we talked about is the power of online streaming. And I know you've done at least one session on Twitch that I was there. And so I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that and how you see maybe it could change the status quo at all.
Yeah, I like this angle that you took, because I hadn't considered it. I think, you know, the DJing. Sorry, the cat's here. Hold on, let me kick them out. Wait, so what were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about the streaming. Yeah, I love this angle that you took on it, because I think DJing, you know, and it's kind of undergone one of the most major democratizations, which is the move to digital, right? People don't need turntables and mixers and all this equipment and all these records. They basically just need a laptop. You know what I mean? They need software and some MP3s, and you can ready to go. And I think that was really important to kind of help it spread, help everyone learn, help people that normally wouldn't have, you know, have access, kind of develop their skills and, you know, have a platform, I guess. And so this is interesting, because I agree with you. I kind of think this is a new age. I think if we're able to kind of leverage it in a smart way, it can result in more dissemination of women DJs, but I do see it kind of falling back on these original, crews and event producers and things like that. Like I've been booked for an stream next week. I don't know when this is airing, but I've been booked for a stream, and I looked at the lineup, and it's 7 of us, and I'm the only woman. And I thought it's a live stream, and I thought everyone's available. And it was kind of that moment where I was like, I know, like, I have to live life with integrity, and I felt awkward because I was like, I don't want them to think that I'm ungrateful, but if I don't say anything, they're not going to notice. So, I made it a point to say, look, I'm sad that I'm the only woman, and I know that you booked everyone, so I'm willing to do a back to back with another female, and they were super into it, so it worked out. But that's all just to say that I kind of see it kind of falling into those old patterns. I think it's beautiful in the sense that you can send someone a link anywhere in the world and they can see you play. The live stream that I did on Twitch that you mentioned, I sent it to my family and friends and colleagues. So there's people in Mexico and Paraguay and Puerto Rico that otherwise would never have been able to see me play unless they were in, the United States. So it's like this instant globalization of your artistic content, which I think is just like incredible. But I think we're gonna have to be ahead of the curve in defining strategies on how to really leverage it and not just fall into these same old patterns of, these people are the ones doing the bookings and they're the ones who are going to ensure that the most people watch your stream. And so I think that this is something maybe the business world can kind of give us some tips on or some pointers on. I don't know if you kind of had thought about that.
I hadn't really thought about it, but I think in doing this session together, what I've realized is, and you said this right before we started recording, is that the music industry is a business. So whatever the business world does in terms of gender inequality is something that could be applicable to the music industry. So I would really love to kind of see more of this, like getting more women in front of the decision makers and having more collaboration and doing things like you said of sharing that space and sharing that time to kind of shift the status quo. The last stat that I want to throw out is that at the current rate of progress, there are some estimates that it's going to take 108 years to close the gender gap. And so if we all don't start doing little things, whether it's being an ally or a mentor or sharing a slot with someone, that is never going to get any faster.
And that's actually, I thought it would be longer, honestly. I mean, that's an entire lifetime. Like, we're going to be dead before we even see, basic protections owed to us, basic consideration for half the world. Um, but yeah, you're completely right. And just to kind of touch on what you had mentioned, I think, male DJs, we had talked about this before the call, but I think it's important that they, keep hustling, keep doing what they're doing. But while they're out there kicking ass, making these Forbes lists and doing all these things, share what you know, like you said, mentor a woman, give her feedback, play their records, recruit them to your radio shows, to your labels, to your festivals. When you headline, look at that lineup and think to yourself, actually, I have a lot of power here. I'm the headlining DJ. I want to see more women. And yeah, I think it's important that you be generous of yourself because every single one of us is for the most part self-taught, but we have had help along the way. There have been people that have booked us, that have, helped us be more confident, that have given us feedback. No one is isolated in this. No one's truly self-made as a DJ in this world. So, be generous. And like you said, as a consumer, be cognizant of when you're buying tickets, of who you're listening to, of the sets that you're sharing, of the music that you play as a DJ too. As a promoter, make sure that you book women, make sure that you pay them equally. I've seen a lot of riders where the women's paid a little bit less and there's like no reason why. We're all kind of like, especially at this local level, like I don't understand why the woman would be paid less. Like, but I've seen riders, so I personally don't know if I've been paid less than that because it's kind of difficult to verify, but I've had friends that have thrown events that have shown me those kinds of things. And, as a female DJ, as we were talking before, we mentioned that, what's the name of the term? Doing the,
Of the what?
in,
Oh, get two in the pool.
Oh, two in the pool. You're right. Sorry, two in the pool. As you had mentioned, as a female DJ, support one another. Have that camaraderie, network. Introduce them to other people. And I think at this point, there's a lot of these female only events. And I personally, I'm into the idea because whatever is going to get the most women out there, whatever is going to have you expose you to a different breadth of musical taste, of experimentation, of uniqueness that men don't provide. I don't want to say women are better, they're better. But when I see a woman play, there's just like this incredible breath that they can take that I don't always see men, kind of match in a way. So, yeah, I mean, those are some really practical things that we can do. And I challenge you, um, go on Facebook, go on Resident Advisor, look at your events, for this week, what would have happened, and just take a look, see what the ratio is. And you'll be surprised. Once you really actually start to notice, you'll be like, what is happening? Like, why do we not know enough women? Like, what is happening, So, I could sit here and tell you all of these things all day, but for you to actually verify this and see this, you'll see it's the case. And it's a shame. There's so much you're missing when you're not listening to a woman, give you that sugar.
That's sweet, sweet sugar. Can attest, I've heard many of your sets and they're delightful. They're just so wonderful. All right, so I'm going to be including links below in the description box for people to get in touch with you about bookings or learning or networking or boobs and beats stuff. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Is there any other thing that you want to share with our lovely viewers?
No, not really. We're just basically trying to work on doing more open decks in New York. If you are watching this in any other city and you have a collective of women and you want to network or share your group or share your sets or share whatever, like I love promoting and sharing things because it takes nothing, you know what I mean? It doesn't take anything away from me to share something that's awesome and promote you. It's not a finite thing, even though it seems that way sometimes, like, oh, I got the booking so they're not going to get it. It's not. We're going to widen this space, you know what I mean? We can make it bigger. We shouldn't have such small minds. So yeah, you're gonna give them the link. Basically, just you can hit me up on Facebook. My email is boobs and beats. The last S is a Z, so beats as a Z at gmail.com. If you wanna be added to our email list, we kind of share stuff. We have a group on Facebook too. So yeah, we would love it. And hopefully, once this is all over, we'll be able to go back to doing our camps at festivals and showcasing women in the festival circuit.
Yeah, we did do a boobs and beats themed camp. That was like our debut, and I'm looking forward to probably not this summer, but maybe next summer having a version 2 of that.
I will actually, and this is a lesson here that I want to say that, I promote all these things, but our very first foray into this camp, I partnered with one of my male DJ friends. And he did the bookings, he knew more DJs. I was kind of new. I was still learning, CDJs and all of that. He did the bookings. He's like, okay, I got people, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until I got to the festival that I realized I was the only woman playing. And I was like, no. I was like, even I did it. I'm here trying to promote women, and I'm the only woman. I was kicking myself. And I thought, I mean, I can't blame him because he booked who he knew, which just goes to show, how that worked out. But we remedied it the next year. We had a couple women. It was fantastic. We were dancing around with our little pasties and everything. So it's all a learning process. We're not trying to like judge anyone or make anyone feel bad or like the devil. Like everyone, is just learning and trying to grow and trying to evolve and trying to remedy, injustices and just make everything balanced for everyone. So, don't be too hard on other people that maybe don't realize, what they're doing sometimes.
Thank you so much, Fatima. It's been so wonderful to have you on the show. And I know that we've inspired a bunch of people to be better.
I hope so. I just think it's such a practical thing, you know what I mean? Like, we can give them all these stats and say all these things, but there are really practical ways that you could have an impact that, I think people just kind of overlook. There's a lot of problems in the world that maybe are a little higher level than us that sometimes we feel impotent about, but I think this is one of those things that we can 100% all work together. So, and thank you so much. I started a journey in Miami, which is where we went to university. It's kind of where I learned about house and all that. So yeah, you've been around since the inception of it. So thank you so much. I'm so happy you wanted to talk about this. And yeah.